Hi everyone. The multimedia for this week is to make sure that you have an example of how to manage the different settings and things that people have asked for throughout our discussions about the logistics behind some of the Moodle setup. Some of this was covered in your Moodle 101 and 102 classes, so I'll try to be quick, but it is really important to know how to make things visible for your students and how to make sure that you're getting the settings you need so that your gradebook is set up correctly. So the first thing I'll do, this is obviously our course and I am in this course as an instructor. So what I'm going to do is go to my gear button and do edit settings. They recently moved this. It annoys me that it's first because it used to be second. I always click on that instead of edit the course itself, and I'll show you that difference in a minute. The settings are actually how your course is structured and set up. So a couple of the really important things here, we'll ask you to please do not change the full name of the course or the short name of the course. Those have to do with how the gradebook syncs to our student information system, and you should not modify or edit those. And that's, I'm talking about your actual real course that has students in it, not the sandbox site that we created. The course category just helps us manage it. Typically this will be a semester, so it'll say spring 2018 or summer 2018, something like that. The really key thing for you to pay attention to and watch is this visible setting. So visible tells you from whatever's in this box whether the students can see it or not. If this is set to show, then the students can see it. If you change this to hide, students can't see it anymore. The reason this is important for you to know is it comes to you by default in hide status to give you time to build it and set it up and get things looking the way you want before students access it. Students will not be able to see even the listing of your course. It won't show out gray. It just will not show on their screen if this is not set to show for your course. So please write this down. We typically ask our faculty to turn on their courses the Friday before classes start on a Monday. And we had a real weird thing this particular semester because they started school on Wednesday. But normally classes will begin on a Monday, and we ask you to turn them on the Friday before. This helps students get your syllabus and get prepared for what it is you're going to expect them to do. In our 16-week courses, also something to write down, we expect students to put in the same amount of time they would in an on-campus class. So the rule of thumb is you go to class for 3 hours a week if it's a 3-credit-hour course, and you spend 2 to 3 hours per week per course outside of class studying or reviewing materials. Now, I think it would be an absolute dream world if all students did that. They'd make much better grades. But that's the expectation. If you are teaching in a 7-week class, we tell students in their introduction letters and in their reminders that I send at the beginning of every term that they are expected to spend 12 to 15 hours per course per week on a 7-week course. You are covering the same learning outcomes that a 16-week course would cover. They are expected to take only 1 or 2 courses at a time. We will let them take 3, but they're not encouraged to do so. The challenge is we have some on-campus students, many on-campus students, mixing these classes with their full semester classes. So my recommendation to you is that you reiterate in your class how much study time is expected for them to do well in your class. So again, if it's a 7-week class, that's 12 to 15 hours is the kind of the default. You may have more or less depending on your content. And they need to know that and remember that. And it's really, really important you make their due dates just overly obvious. I have been in a situation where I was teaching a 7-week class and a 16-week class at the same time. I was having a hard time keeping up with the due dates. I know the students were, and it was feedback that I got, and so I tried to adjust that. So just be aware that students are often juggling far different things than you may be in a particular teaching setting. So make those due dates really, really obvious. So let me get back to this. So the course start date, actually going down this row, the start date is the date that your classes begin. Now, we didn't adjust the teaching online class from when it was visible last time. We just left it visible. So don't worry about that. The end date, these are important because it affects when the student can see the course based on how Kira makes the categories available. So you do want to make sure these dates fill in correctly. I'm going to ask you to please not put a description for your course. This shows up on the student's main page. It also shows up if people search Moodle for something, and it makes that page scroll tremendously. Your course summary or course description should be in your syllabus. It's a requirement in your syllabus. You're welcome to put it on your course site as a label as well, but please don't fill in that description box. One of the things that I like to do, I'm going to use this expand all button up here. I try to get in a habit of doing this no matter where I am in Moodle if I am on an edit settings page, because there are lots of categories and it's easy to miss information. So I'm going to go down under my description. I actually did do expand all. So in the course format setup, we have this course set up in a weekly format. What that does is it allows you to highlight the week that you're on. It kind of makes the box a different shade of color. It's not always 100% accurate because we have that getting started block in the front and the computer's not actually reading what dates you have on there. It's counting the blocks based on the start date. So what I usually do is change it to a topics format, especially for the 7-week classes, and that allows you to name your weeks or topics however you want. I have, excuse me, I did not sleep well last night. I have a faculty member that has some very complex units in the immunology class, and some of those topics go across weeks. So he doesn't want his called a weekly format, week 1, week 2, week 3. He only has 4 categories, 4 blocks in his class, and he names them the topics that he's covering in immunology, but he puts the longer week spread on it. You can do this if you like. The goal is to help students be able to navigate and find where they are, keeping in mind they are managing courses, maybe up to 3 different types of start date course types. So we have the 7-week, the 8-week, and the 16-week. So just be aware of that. As you go through, you can choose to show hidden sections in collapse form. So that would show, like topic 2 would show up, it just wouldn't be able to be expanded, or you can completely hide them until you get them set up. That's your choice. Course layout, we typically recommend show all sections on one page. Students get lost. They don't always scroll. Or they are used to scrolling, I'm sorry, and if they scroll and there's nothing there, they're not used to looking for the little click next button to get to the next week. So we recommend that you show all sections on one page. These are just some general settings you can go through. You are not able to change file uploads. We typically leave all these at the default. 64 megs is the largest upload file size you can have. That has to do with the storage that we have through our vendor, as well as data requirements and things, trying to keep this all manageable. Some of you will have groups, and I'm going to do a whole separate video on this. Group mode has to do with whether or not you are grouping your students by sections. Where we use this a lot is if we have a large class and you're going to use discussion boards. You can tell just from our class of 11 how long discussion boards can get each week, and the importance of kind of keeping those into distinct categories and topics so that it's not all mixed up. If you can imagine what that would look like if you had 100 in your class, and we do have some online classes with over 100 in them. What we do in those cases is the faculty member is obviously the lead teacher. We divide those into group sizes, typically about 30, This is where our instructional connections partners come in, and we have academic assistants that take the lead for particular groups. So from the student experience, it looks like they're in a class of 30 and they have lots of people to communicate with, but they're not overwhelmed by over 100 responses and all the different stuff. It helps the teacher and the academic assistant be able to switch between groups and see that smaller amount. So just be aware that's where we use groups, and we do force group mode on when we do that. We select them to be separate groups so they can't even see across the groups. So it's really like 3 different sections of the class in one Moodle site. But they can't see each other. You can choose, and you may choose for different reasons, to have visible groups where you can have them work across groups or at least see across groups what information is going on. And since I don't have any groups, if you do separate groups, grouping is a little bit different thing, and so I'm not going to get into that detail, but you can look that up on just Google Moodle grouping and you'll find details on it, but we have not been using that. You don't need to rename any roles. Please don't rename any roles, because that's how we have a lot of our stuff set up. And you always want to be sure to save and display when you get to the bottom of the page. You will probably only hit this particular edit settings link once a semester. Maybe twice, when you go to set it up, how you want to set it up, and then when you turn it on. Kira typically will send an email asking faculty to remember to turn on the courses. We don't want you to turn them on any more than a week in advance. Our goal is that Friday before school starts, and the absolute last date we would like you to turn those on is 8 o'clock on the morning that classes start. The IT department gets tons of calls from students if they don't see those courses show up in Moodle because they've paid for them and they believe something's wrong with their registration. So please keep that in mind. So this concludes the settings part of the video. I'm going to end this one and I'll switch over and do one on using some of the edit tools.